درود به مردم شریف ایران. من شهریار افشار هستم، میزبان شما در Politics 365. امروز آقای محمد اسیده به برنامه ما پیوسته. ایشون یه فرد فلسطینی هستن در رامالا، فلسطین. الان مقیم اونجا هستن و یه نماینده مؤسسه غیر انتفاعی هستن به اسم روزانا. کار روزانا بیشتر به موضوع بهداشتی و به کمک از نظر هلث به مردم فلسطین هستش که کار خب همونطور که الان میتونید تصور کنید کار الان خیلی سختیه. ایشون مدت‌هاست در این زمینه فعالیت کرده. یه شخصیت سیاسی نیست، فقط یه فردی هست که در زمینه مؤسسه غیر انتفاعی داره، یه عمر فعالیت میکنه. بقیه برنامه به انگلیسی هستش، ما رو ببخشید. Mohammad Asideh, welcome to Politics 365. So wonderful to meet you. So grateful for your time and really the work you're doing for the people that need the most help around the world, really, it seems like right now. Tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into this field? And then we want to talk about your work with Rosanna.
Sure. Shahriar, thank you very much for having me on this podcast. It's really a pleasure. And thanks for the work you are doing to raise awareness and to bring people and sometimes even conflicted ideas to a middle ground. I think this is very, very useful. And and I think you are based in California?
Yeah, San Diego.
San Diego, one of the most beautiful places I visited in the US. And I get to spend some time in the US. Actually, the first trip I did to the US was to speak on Palestinian-Israeli conflict and my life as a Palestinian under the military occupation. So I went to San Diego University, and I got to meet many from the Iranian community in California. So I know when I'm speaking on this show, I'm not reaching to the converted, and I know how much intelligent the Iranian society is, all the culture, the cinema, the music, the history, all of that. And I'm speaking to a population that really reads a lot and knows what's happening. So I don't really have anything to convince the people who are listening to this show, but more to tell them about what we are trying to do. I'm not trying to convince, but probably to give some insights on the work we're doing, and especially that I'm based in Palestine nowadays. So it means even more to me that I'm speaking with you and that you start with Paris. So I grew up in a small town in the north of the West Bank called Tel, very close to a city called Nablus. My town is famous for figs, olive trees, and farming. So I spent more than half of my life so far in farming until I was 23 years old, till I finished college. I was a farmer. I milked the cows every morning, every evening. I worked in the farm. I hated it so much, but I've learned a lot from my work in farming. I studied politics and I always wanted to do something more. But I had to work in farming because I grew up during the Second Intifada, which is the Palestinian uprising against the military occupation in 2000. I was still a kid back then, 12 years old. My dad lost his job, so I had to join him and try to start a small business. We bought a donkey and we started selling milk and yogurt in the city, in the refugee camps during the war. And that taught me that, you know, the true heroes are the fathers and mothers who wake up every morning during the war under those circumstances and try to make a living and to raise their kids to the best they can, which is sometimes that's really the most difficult thing to do. I studied political science, and I always was, you know, I wasn't always interested in politics. Before the uprising, before 2000, I wanted to become a soccer player, a football player. But then during the uprising, everything in life became around politics. And I know the Iranians are, you know how it is. You speak politics in the morning, in the afternoon, at night, before you go to sleep. Even the stories you tell to the kids, sometimes it's really politics. So that became my life, and I became interested in it. It became my passion. I was very lucky to work a little bit in the US. very close to the Congress, and I worked in advocacy. And I worked as well with an American organization called Cure Violence. They do amazing job to reduce crime in communities, not just in the US, but also in Latin America and around the world. And I learned that, you know, people have different conflicts. Sometimes they don't grow up in a conflict zone or in Palestine and Israel. Sometimes that place could be Baltimore, Chicago, or some other place. Which also parents have a huge struggle as well to raise their kids in such violent communities sometimes, unfortunately, with so much polarization. But I always knew at the core of it, politics is good, but it's not really the foundation of civilized communities, but the foundation has been always policy rather than politics. Wherever you have good policies, you have a healthy, strong community and society. You have a civilized nation that contributes to the world. And in order to have policy, you need good policymakers. And I think from your background, you know this better than me. You need good leaders, good policies, and then you have a good society. So I quit my job in the US and I moved to Singapore to become a student again. I studied public policy in Singapore. I want to learn from that experience from Southeast Asia, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, and all those amazing experiences. I thought that's a closer model to us. There's the East and the West. There's the cultural differences that influences policy making. And I thought, you know, I've learned a lot in the US. And then that was a great opportunity for me to learn in Southeast Asia. I did part of my master in France, and that gave me exposure to Europe as well, which is a whole different model. I went back to Palestine and I thought, you know, I've been always determined to contribute back. Leaving Singapore was actually an easy thing to do, to leave Singapore and to go back to Palestine. I did anyways. And I think that was the right decision. I joined Project Rosanna 2 years ago. And I felt what we need in Palestine really is to ask the question, what can be done even before the military occupation ends? Listen, as I said from the beginning, I'm not reaching to the converted, so that's not my goal today. It's not advocacy. I want to focus more on what can we, the Palestinians, do to start building our institutions, empowering our society, building the economy, with or without Israel's approval, with or without the US approval, or Europe, or the Arab world, so on. I think the challenge we have here with our leaders, they always ask about what the US wants, what Europe wants us to do. They rarely ask what do our people want us to do? What's the main interest in Palestine? And I think, you know, there isn't anything more powerful than a small group of people with a vision and determination to make it happen. And that's what I want to see in Palestine. In Project Rosanna, we're investing in improving the health institutions in Palestine through a development approach, not aid. So we don't provide health services, but we try to find the gaps in the health system in Palestine and to improve it. Sometimes it's a specialization that doesn't exist in Palestine. Sometimes it's capacity building for nurses. We have a project called the Nursing Hub, where we have 450 Palestinian and Israeli nurses trained together in some of the most advanced hospitals, funded by the USAID. So thank you for the donation. And I think those are some of the areas that the US needs to invest in more than supplying weapons and arms and so on. The USAID doing amazing job and representing the US better than anyone else abroad. And I think that must continue, and we see the impact of it. So our work is not just capacity building, but we know it brings people together to create more understanding, to work together for better policies, despite the differences. So when almost 48% of the Israeli of the doctors in Israeli hospitals are Palestinians, right? And they work together with Jewish Israeli doctors and nurses, not because they agree on everything. There is also always the political element, but we work together despite the differences for a greater cause, which is serving the people.
Right. That's a very important point. I think health, doctors, people in medicine, nurses, health practitioners, they transcend politics, it seems like, because their first charge is taking care of the injured, the people that are ill, Jewish, Palestinian, American, Iran, it doesn't matter. I think we can learn a lot from the way the health community comes together, shares information, helps each other, and just leaves politics at the door. And if that's something that you're cultivating and you're expanding, then more power to you, because I think it could be transformational. The more of that type of cooperation we see, the more the world can see what's possible when we work together.
Absolutely. I think, the approach we're trying to do is also to have some influence on the bigger level. So we work on 3 levels. The first one is individual, people to people. That kind of interaction is very important, but the institutional interaction is equally or even more important. Last year, we succeeded in signing 3 memorandum of understanding between 3 Palestinian hospitals and 3 Israeli hospitals. And I think that was extremely important to improve the health system in Palestine. The point is a more powerful, independent Palestinian health system can be a better partner for peace, to reduce dependency on the Israeli health system through mutual cooperation. So Palestinians can be treated here in Palestine instead of being treated somewhere else. So we're bringing the expertise, but along the way, we're improving understanding. We're making sure that there is a better environment to support peace deal and agreement, and that the Israeli society is aware of the military occupation and its practices here in the West Bank, and that the Palestinians get to know the Israeli society more, not the radical extremist face of Israel that we see within the settlers community here in the West Bank. No, the Israeli society, and to be fair, they are very advanced, very smart, all the Nobel Prizes. They are, they have great culture. And I don't think we want to see them as enemies. We want to see them as friends, as partners, but we have a long way to get there. And that would include, of course, regional cooperation at some point, but it all starts with ending the military occupation, an independent state that's treated equally in this world. So at some point, I could change it on LinkedIn to say Palestine instead of the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah,
hopefully.
for other people's benefit, people that are listening, your profile on LinkedIn says Palestinian Authority because it doesn't give you an option to select Palestine as a country, or as a state. As in, it only gives you the authority option. So thank you for that clarification. Do you feel there are other NGOs or nonprofit organizations that you can work with or you can work more with that share your vision, or are you kind of in your own silo working independently, as you put it?
No, absolutely not. We don't work independently. Nothing of what we do is done by Rosanna itself. We will consider ourselves as facilitators. There are gaps and there are resources, and what we have is misallocation. And it's just probably like anything else in this world. I remember I was reading something that, someone was questioning why God allows, if God exists, why does he allow kids to have cancer, poverty, and famine, and all of that, wars and suffering? But then the writer was explaining that that's not true. Actually, God doesn't allow that, because we do have, God created us on earth with everything we need to prevent famine, to make sure that the kids grow healthy and don't suffer in wars and so on. So we're in this with everything that we need to make the world better. And I think it's the same here in Palestine, Israel. Despite all the problems that we have all the resources, not just to solve the problem, but to create probably one of the best environments to live in ever on the Mediterranean, with all the rich history, the three religions that exist here and even more, and the connections that everyone in the world have to this place. It's very hard to find another place like it. There might be some more beautiful places in the world, and I tell you, in Southeast Asia, yes, there are even many more beautiful places than here. But there isn't any place as unique as this location. And I have no idea why. You know, I'm not so religious. And I get to go to Jerusalem twice. I'm not allowed by the Israeli army to go there, but I made it twice. And I went to the old city of Jerusalem. And I had goosebumps, even though I'm not religious. I have no idea what is it about this place, right? But there's a reason why people have connection to it. And we do have the resources to make it one of the most beautiful, safest places for every Jew, Muslim, Christian, despite everything that's happening here. And what we want is an independent, safe Palestinian state that lives next to a safe, independent Israeli state. It's as simple as that.
Thank you for that explanation, Mohammad. That was exactly what I often wonder. What's so special about this place that people are fighting and dying for all these thousands of years? However tragic the histories of these two nation states, communities, groups have been, as you put it, there is still hope in your heart for a two-state solution where both states can live in peace and they can value each other, they can support each other. Already, as you put it, there are already Palestinian doctors working in Jewish hospitals. I mean, if that isn't an example of cooperation and coexistence, I don't know what is. You know, I mean, you trust your doctor, I mean, more than anybody else in the world to take care of you. And here they are, Palestinian doctors in Jewish hospitals. It must be very difficult for them on many levels, watching what's happening in Gaza. And of course, watching what happened on October 7 cannot be left unsaid. Nobody wanted October 7. There's
Absolutely.
no justification on any level for October 7. But frankly, as the International Criminal Court has raised eyebrows, there's no justification of what's been happening in Gaza since October 7. Beyond what fighting with Hamas in a very narrow conversation is about. The loss of innocent lives in Gaza is just unmistakable, and the world is watching. I think you correctly also separated the extremists in the Israeli community, which is well known. Americans see it, Israelis see it. You're not saying it because you're Palestinian. You're pointing out a factual existence of a very hard line. And you know what? We have that in America. We have that hardliners in America.
Absolutely.
We have hardliners in Iran. So you have minority hardliners in every community pushing the political powers towards destruction and fighting and destroying each other instead of working together. So I pray, like you, I'm not very religious, but sometimes I feel you need to pray for peace, for cooler heads to prevail, for people like you to be able to be successful in building health diplomacy, which is so important. If you don't have health diplomacy, I don't know what else you can build on it. If you literally cannot ensure the health of your community, everything else is built on an unstable foundation: social, cultural, economic, business, political, right? So I really hope and pray for your success. Mohammad Asideh, thank you so much for joining us. I learned a lot. I felt for a minute I was in Jerusalem myself, and seeing what you were seeing and valuing what you see as a cultural and religious institution in the world stage, not just important to Jews and Palestinians and Muslims, but to everybody in the world. And everybody just wants peace and prosperity. 1,000 thank you, Mohammad Asideh, for joining us.
Thanks to you.
I wish you great success and health.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.